Welcome to Coffee and Conversations, mini episodes by victims and villains. And I'm so excited to present this companion episode to our recent Shark Boy and Lava Girl episode, where we talked about how to address mental health with your children and among other things as well. Also talking about the brand new pseudo sequel, which is We Can Be Heroes, which you guys can stream right now on Netflix. And I'm here with one of the film's stars, Mr. Brently Heilbron, who plays Crushing Low. How you doing this morning?
Doing great, thank you. Stars is a generous word, but I got to fly around with the Mandalorian. That was pretty cool.
Yeah, I mean, before we kind of get into the movie, I want to get into another project that you are also do, which is a emo puppet band called Fragile Rock. And you guys have a 2017 full-length release, which you guys can stream now on all music platforms. We'll leave a link in the description. But I'm so curious about how this project started, because it kind of reminds me of that scene from Pitch Perfect where they walk in the very end and Fat Amy just goes like, "Oh, they're using sock puppets. Genius."
Yeah, so it would all, that's Pitch Perfect is pretty much the inspiration to everything I do. So I like that we're already calling it out. In this project, so, yeah, it's an emo puppet band. We're very real and very felt. And years ago at this point, this must have been 2014, I had gotten divorced and was going through, a pretty bad breakup at the time. And in my own artistic mind, I think we all have those like wonderful emo songs that come out of us at those times. And I think I tried to write them. And what came out was I'm going to start an emo puppet band and call it Fragile Rock. Just that one sentence. That was my dealing with it. I put that out on Facebook at the time. And this being Austin, people responded, "I'll play bass for that. I'll build puppets for that." I didn't even intend it to be a thing in real life. And so it's one of those crazy little ideas that just had legs. So people gravitated towards it. A lot of musicians, improvisers, puppeteers, great group of people in Austin. And we made a video for it, as simple as that. And it was, all of us are pretty open about depression and things like that. It was a way to kind of deal with those topics with puppets, but also under the guise of kind of satirizing sort of ego lead singers and emo bands, that kind of stuff. So we did a video for it, which you can see. And then little by little, it just grew. We started doing live shows here in Austin. We started to play concerts. We played South by Southwest, and then NPR got a hold of us. And there we did a Tiny Desk concert. It was just, so from a joke Facebook post all the way to Tiny Desk and back, it's one of those crazy ideas that I just love so much. So thanks for shouting it out.
That's awesome. So what point for you did it kind of become a reality of kind of taking yourself seriously? Because it's one thing to kind of like put out a couple songs, but you guys put out a full length back in 2017, which I think is really interesting too, because I like the kind of like little poetry that you guys have woven in there, but also kind of the comedy skits as well. It's a very interesting structure that kind of like pokes fun, but like also like is a nod to like the genre of emo music, while also kind of being like a parody. Like it finds itself kind of like right walking that line between like parody and love letter.
Yeah, and I think when you're playing a character that takes itself really seriously, you don't have to per se. So, we just kind of let those characters take themselves and their lives and their drama very, very, very seriously, be very precious about it. And we just get to have a blast. We try to make a point early on, though, to have the music be as good. I was very inspired, of course, by Spinal Tap and those kind of bands. But in Spinal Tap itself, Christopher Guest, Michael McKean, Harry Shearer, they're real musicians, and they take it very seriously, and they practice and they practice, and they played their own stuff. And so the musicians in the band have worked so hard, and I'm so in awe just to make it sound as good as it does. And then we are all from the comedy world. And so our live shows are kind of what you hear on the album, right? There's a lot of banter. We tried to really focus on the interplay between the players, right? The lead singer and the guy he, craps on in the band, the love interest, bass player, and all those band dynamics that have been playing out since Mike Love and the Beach Boys. And I love music history and band drama. It's so hilarious to me. So we just try to replicate that live.
I really want to see one of your guys' live shows. Like, I've seen the pictures and like some of the videos online, but listening to it on Spotify and like actually being able to see it in real life are like completely two different things. So hopefully once COVID's done, you guys can tour up to my neck of the woods and can do a real like live show for.
We'd love that. I mean, we were ready to do South by, and then 2 weeks later it was canceled, and then we've been kind of dormant ever since. But we would love to play live. The live shows are pretty crazy, and we had to learn how to build a live show. It was never intended to be done live. We didn't know how we do it. We really built it with puppets on video first, just to make a video. But it was so fun. Who doesn't want to be in a band? And so we just learned how to do it live, and in a way that you can kind of see everything. And we've had to learn how to do that. And it's so cathartic of an experience to scream and yell at your best friends in the world. It's, the kind of friend that you can have these fake screaming matches with. So Megan Thornton, who is a great writer and puppeteer, and she plays Nick Hole, my ex-girlfriend in the band. And, we just have a blast. And it's really fun to take real life emotional situations and really emotional weight and put it on puppets. And so it's very cathartic and very therapeutic,
I think one of the things that I really enjoy about listening to Fragile Rock was I grew up on emo music. So like emo music's like really nostalgic for me. So kind of like stepping into the world of Fragile Rock, one of the things that I really respected was how open you guys were to talk about things like depression and make it vulnerable and make it really just out in the open. I think I believe the song that the album opens up on, I'm So Sad. And it's just about kind of going through depression. When you're writing some of the music for this lyrically, how did you find, it was being open about things like depression?
Well, it's I am sad and so am I. The all too important parentheticals, which is like a very pretentious thing to do as a songwriter. Just have a title, and this is my alternate title. I remember writing that song. It was one of those things that I think it helps when you have a genre to pull from, like as anything else, and you're kind of starting with some pretty great source material, right? And you don't want to parody it, but you want to have something that can exist in that genre, like equally. So on that, it was just sort of, I think I was also satirizing. I run a really fine line when I've done comedy for years, but my comedy itself was never autobiographical. It was emotionally autobiographical, but never like, here are the facts of my life. So that's not comfortable for me. So this was the perfect opportunity to take a character and put all the sometimes we do feel whiny and we do feel self-pitying, and that's not an attractive kind of vibe to put out in the world. So, but with a puppet, it kind of makes it okay, right? We can be the worst of ourselves, and sometimes we don't feel good. And so really try to throw it into that. Our live shows, though, have turned into we have a section where everybody calls out in the audience what antidepressants they're on. We have a song called Anti-Depressed. All of us are on antidepressants. And we assume that, okay, now that we're taking antidepressants, we're no longer depressed, we're anti-depressed. So there's a little section, everyone call out their favorite antidepressants. It's one of those things that, I've had to learn as a parent and all those things to really be open and talk about depression. It's brain chemistry. And there's work and therapy that goes with that, obviously, but it can be as simple. And so this project, is funny enough, has helped me talk about anxiety, depression, in a real way with my kids, my friends, my wife, etc. So.
And I really love that, is that it feels like such a welcoming tone that you guys have with Fragile Rock. And I recommend all of our listeners right now, go check this band out. Bump up the numbers on Spotify.
Bump up the numbers, yes. You can find us at Fragile Rock Band on Instagram, Twitter, and Facebook, and online. And we'll be back 2021.
Fingers crossed.
Fingers crossed.
So 9 years before you guys really got started taking off, there was a little movie called The Adventures of Shark Boy and Lava Girl, and it's now like this like pseudo sequel in We Can Be Heroes. But had you prior to like kind of getting in the fold of being casted in this movie, were you aware of this movie and like had you seen it?
Oh, for sure. My kids were small at the time, so they were, and I was already a huge Robert Rodriguez fan growing up in Texas, and just
yes,
so I was already a huge fan, and his kind of jumping in to the family film genre was just so cool, because you could do the most badass action movie like Desperado, El Mariachi, and then go do the funnest kids thing in the world like Spy Kids. So my daughter and my son, they were the perfect age when Shark Boy and Lava Girl came out. Never did I think I'd be in that universe, but so that's the way it works, man.
I'm wondering from like an insider's like point of view, if you can kind of like explain the dynamics of the Shark Boy and Lava Girls universe, because we were talking about this on our episode. Like when you look at the original film, it's like it's all in Max's head, and like Planet Drool's like all from imagination that just happens to kind of like be real enough to exist in the world very briefly. But yet in We Can Be Heroes, it feels like a completely like normalized, almost like on par with like a junior version of like the Avengers or the Boys.
Well, to quote the gospel of Mystery Science Theater 3000, just repeat to yourself, it's just a show. I should really just relax. So because I think that I read that, I read those fan theories and like, the first one is in Max's head and the invented characters, and this is in the real world. And I think it's like, yeah. And that's, from my understanding, because the cool thing about Shark Boy and Lava Girl is that Racer, Max, Robert's son, is the one who came up with these characters and gets full credit, which is so cool. It's such a family affair. Like, love his family there. It's such a fun vibe. And that with this one, I think my guess is they were going for more of like a kid's version of the Avengers and sort of their media love and the way of the boys and all that stuff. And so it's so on point, right? And some of those like selfies and boning up to a camera, things like that. So again, I love playing fevered egos. It keeps my own in check. So it was fun to come be a superhero for a couple days, man.
So you play Crushing Low in this movie, who is one of the members of the Heroics. And kind of before like we get into like talking about like the technicalities and like what it's like to be a superhero, even for a couple of days, how did you get involved with this project?
Well, I had done a film with Robert previously called Red 11, which hasn't been out yet, which was a kind of an homage to El Mariachi that he made for $7,000. So he just wanted to he was doing a contest for young filmmakers to do a project for $7,000, and he would mentor them. And I think he just wanted to make one himself. So him and his son, Racer, I went and auditioned for him. He then wrote a part for me, which apparently is his sort of habit, right? He'll audition midway through the writing process, which I didn't know. And then like, this guy's interesting. She's cool. I'm going to write something for her. And came up with this character named Doc Sock, which is an homage to Fragile Rock, which I appreciate. And just played some psychopath doctor based on Robert's experience kind of being a lab rat when he was raising money for El Mariachi. So it's called Red 11. It's coming out on Tubi to be determined. So I'd already kind of had a relationship and always said, hey, we're going to have you back in the Troublemaker family. We're going to have you back anytime. And that experience was just incredible. So along comes We Can Be Heroes. And I think I had auditioned for a few bit parts, right? The newscaster, or someone announcing the president, or just someone that comes on with coffee and goes, "Your coffee, Priyanka Chopra," and hey, that would have been awesome. So I just love movies so much, like I'm thrilled in any capacity. So I get a call back shortly thereafter for one of the superhero parts, and I think at the time he was called Atomic Man, and then later he named it Crushing Low, which is really one of the weirder superhero names. And I always like to say his superpower is to get for like extreme depression, because it's such a strange emo title. And again, he's been so funny about these like nods to Fragile Rock. So however he got the name Crushing Low, got the script, like no lines. And I'm like, this is awesome. I don't have to there's no pressure. To be a superhero is when you're like a little insecure Jewish kid from Dallas and suddenly you're like crushing through buildings and stuff. It's so cool. But from a technical perspective and how they did a lot of this stuff, it was very new to me as an actor, as a performer. I've never really worked with those kind of technical aspects, being up on wires, for example, or motion capture where they, you go into a trailer and they take 1,000 pictures of you at the same time. Then they go, "Thank you, we can do whatever we want with you." And that's how I, fly into a building, for example, destroying Austin City Hall like the anarchist that you would expect.
Now, I equally also too love film, and I'm also a comic book nerd. As you guys can kind of see behind me, I have a Dark Knight behind me and Birds of Prey up here as well. Like I love those kind of lores, and I love like those like first images that we get of like these very iconic heroes. But what was it like for you just being able to like see yourself in costume for the first time at Crushing Low?
That's the coolest. I mean, like that's the thing is this is why I love projects like Fragile Rock and stuff, because behind it can be the geek who's like, I'm in a band, and it's so fun. And the same as being an actor. I'm not very precious. I love what I do. For sure, and enjoy it every second. I've been really fortunate enough to have just these really interesting gigs in my life. So from second one of stepping on set in your spandex outfit, I mean, how could you not have a blast? And so the last day of shooting where we all got to fly on wires, I mean, you're up on this thing. It's totally uncomfortable in this harness. It's really exciting. You're 20 feet up in the air. And I remember just beside myself going, I like movies, like a child. I think I said that out loud and everyone's laughing. And, that's part of my personality anyway. Like, I'm going to have a good time on set. I'm going to be nice to work with. I'm a creator and a producer. And so when I'm a player in someone else's thing, I'm just going to be easy to work with. And so I just had a blast. And so I think it's so, so fun. Like I look at myself in that movie and a lot of it is like, why do I look like that? Well, there's like wind in my face and you can see how awkward I'm flying because I'm on strings and I'm all limbs. I'm graceful and like that. But so cool, man. From a comic book nerd perspective from where I grew up, I mean, like I grew up on Image and DC and all these great stuff. And so to be in anything that feels like a comic book come to life, and that's what it looked like. The set was really cool and bright and the kids designed it and they got to work with the kids. And that was a whole great experience in and of itself.
So you talked about like this being your first foray into kind of like a larger production like this. What were some of the challenges for you as an actor having to do some of the green screen work?
No challenges. It's so fun. I mean, it's funny. I'm not Ian McKellen yet where I'm like, I'm not here to act with a tennis ball. It's like, I'm not there yet so I don't really have how can I stoop to? The cool thing though, so Troublemaker Studios, a little back info, is actually built in the former airport of Austin, and it's the hangar where George W. Bush had his presidential plane. So it's this big, huge hangar of a building, and it's filled, talk about a movie nerd, with all the props from Desperado, Spy Kids, Alita. I mean, they're just filled. It's like a movie lover's dream. It's just so the energy of the place is already creative, stimulating, and great. When it came to green screen acting, there was a couple scenes where we are on the alien spaceship, for example, and there's, we're kind of coming out. That was in a giant green screen room. But the rest of it, they actually built those sets, right? So these giant purple tentacle-looking sets were all physical in there. So there was a lot less green screen stuff on my end, right? Except for the flying and stuff like that in terms of the scenes. But if you take a movie that he did like Sin City, and I was talking to his assistant director who worked on all these movies with Robert, they did Sin City in the second one entirely in a green screen. And that is just one room. So I don't know. I think that that's kind of part of the challenge, and I would totally do more.
So an aspect of the relationship of We Can Be Heroes is passing the heroic baton from one set of heroes in their generation to another. And the kids that we follow throughout the majority of the film are all sons and daughters of the current roster of the heroics. And so what kind of method did you use to do with your on-screen offspring to kind of make and develop that relationship be authentic?
Yeah, and so two things about that. One, the whole idea of passing the torch is a really great feeling, right? So that's what I believe. That's kind of my philosophy of kind of artistic inspiration. When you're not feeling it, take your toe out of the water. It's like a current that's ever evolving, and that'll keep you from feeling stagnant and really bored and frustrated and resentful about your own stuff. So I do like the idea in general of like, hey, we always pass the torch to the next crew. When it came to working with Andrew Diaz, who's hilarious and just a great guy, and they were all there with their families. I started off in stand-up comedy like at 14, right? So I remember being in 8th grade in Dallas and doing comedy clubs, and there were nice people and there were not so nice people, and there were really negative people and there were positive people. And I remember thinking, I don't want to end up being like that, right? In terms of kind of really being negative. There's plenty of reasons enough. And so now at this point, to kind of be older and to have a kid this is his first movie too. And it was a chance for me, and I think all the heroic adults, to be a positive person and be totally honest and to these kids that are just starting off their careers. And so you want to be a safe person for them to talk to, like an older friend. So we all hung out and we all ate together, and they shot all the kids stuff before, and then they kind of released the kids, and then they shot all the adult stuff. So there was a little bit of a transition, not very long, to get to know the kids. So, maybe a week or two, and then the rest was totally separate. But it was a really cool chance. I got to know his parents, and just to say, like, listen, I want to be a resource for you guys. I want to answer questions. How is it like on the set? What do auditions and things like that? I always want to be honest. Here's where I made mistakes. You don't have to, it was a nice special chance to help kids who are starting off get started on the right foot with a kind of right attitude. This is a tough, talk about from a mental health perspective. This is a business of constant rejection, and sometimes some really big wins, right? And so how do you celebrate the wins without getting over your head, and how do you deal with the rejections without sinking? So
I think that's one of the things that I've always really appreciated about Robert Rodriguez as a director and creator, is that he's willing to take those chances despite whatever reception might come to it. So when you look at his filmography, he can go from doing a movie like From Dusk Till Dawn and turn around and do Spy Kids, a few short years later, and then follow it up with some music videos and some Mandalorian episodes, and then follow it up with We Can Be Heroes. And it's so interesting to kind of see how family really portrays in that, because when you look at this movie, it doesn't really feel like a Robert Rodriguez film, in my opinion. And that's one of the things that I really enjoy, is that he's so versatile as a director. And so what's the environment like that he creates on set for family films?
Oh, it was the same environment really that we did on this last film, which is in no way a family film. It's positive, it's supercharged creatively, right? This was a big budget Netflix thing, so there's tons of people around. The vibe was the same though. His family is there every day, his kids. So you're seeing not just in how he tells me to deal with my movie son, I'm just seeing him treat his own family accordingly and bring them into the artistic process. And it's so inclusive that it's infectious. Like, it's just the funnest vibe. And I would work with that guy anytime. And that whole family is just, I can't say enough. But in terms of this being like a Robert Rodriguez project, one of the things I got to say about Rodriguez is that I don't think he gets enough credit for is him being and I talked to him about this because I'm a big fan of like movie history, and I love silent movies, for example. I just love Buster Keaton, Harold Lloyd, that kind of stuff. And he would have made such a great silent movie director because his timing is so top notch. And this is, again, my first foray into action movies as an actor, but I'm an appreciator of them, right? And Desperado, if you look at like some of those scenes in Desperado or El Mariachi, all the comedy's in the editing and in the timing. And he does this kind of frenetic, fast-paced thing, and We Can Be Heroes in some of those scenes, especially in some of the early flying action alien scenes that are very much indicative of Rodriguez and his like quick editing. And this comes from his own mind because he's editing them himself. One other thing I really like about him is his just inquisitiveness and wanting to grow as a person, as an artist. I think when it came down, I think it was one of the Spy Kids movies where it was about gaming, and he was like, I'm going to learn how to code and make video games so I could, do this myself. So he really is a one-man band, but he's got a good crew around him for sure.
That's awesome. And it's interesting to kind of see how he takes the Troublemaker name from one project to another. And I guess my last question for you right now is, when you first read the script, how did you kind of feel about the twist in the ending? I'm gonna say this up front. We talked about this in the episode. There are some spoilers that we had in the episode, but from a fan of Rodriguez, film, superheroes, as a parent, as a performer, what was your kind of thoughts like reading the ending of this film?
Oh man, I mean, well, I was originally insulted that the movie was not called The Crushing Low Experience plus His Friends. So already there, I was very negative about it. Haven't gotten over that. I mean, the twist ending didn't bother me. I think, you want to set it up to tell future stories, and I love that. Hey, you want to argue about the ending or the twist or piss you off like it's a Criterion movie? Go to town, man. That's fun. That's just part about being a geek, right? The audience has all the rights in the world, and I always, as a comedian, as an actor, you got to give it up to the audience because it's their show too. And they're the critics. And so I don't know. I stay out of that fray. But what do you have strong opinions on it, man? You tell me.
All right. So minor spoiler warnings. It was just kind of like you'd been with these characters for like an hour and a half, and then you're like, oh, there's no bad guy. The whole thing was a training exercise. Okay. I felt like I wasn't the right audience for that movie, if it makes sense.
Yeah, that's totally it exactly, right? I think it's like, it's like 7-year-olds. Now, can you imagine though, if you were a kid, like if I was a kid watching this, I would have probably watched it multiple times, been fantasizing about being one of these guys. Cause I was a kid, man, I want to be a superhero. I want to be a WWF wrestler. I practiced all these things. And so to see a picture, like someone took a picture of me, I'm up on the wires, and it's my favorite picture anyone's ever taken of me. I'm beaming like a child. And Crushing Low is supposed to be like, I'm beaming, I'm thrilled. And it's such a delightful picture. So I think that, when it comes to the twist ending, let's just take it back a notch and age ourselves down a touch, and we'll be okay. Something will be okay. And it's the same way of like, wait a minute, I love these film theory arguments that are like, wait, how can Shark Boy and Lava Girl have kids? Isn't she made of fire? Wouldn't that have? Yep, all those things are true.
Man, I didn't even think about that.
Yeah, let's get deep on it, man. Let's get deep with it. But even I love seeing those characters come to life. I just think it's really fun when characters exist in different worlds, because it's like the old what ifs of comics, you know what I mean? And I used to read those and of the comics. They just kind of are Doctor Who mashups that don't really make a lot of sense, but here we are. So I think sometimes it's just fun to see characters back, and we'll figure out the details.
Now, I guess like my final question is, you talked about when Shock Boy and Lava Girl came out, your kids were of young. Did you ever take them to the set to actually meet Taylor Dooley and kind of like see like, hey, this is someone from your childhood?
Yeah, that didn't end up actually happening just timing wise, but they were excited. I mean, and I hit it off with Taylor. She is hilarious. And the first day on the set, I was singing Neil Diamond to myself, which is what I do when I get nervous. And she goes, is that Neil Diamond? And we're on the set, and it's like Christian Slater and Pedro Pascal. And I'm like, what am I doing here? What? It's like imposter syndrome. You go, right. There's Lava Girl and Gleaming the Cube and the Mandalorian. What am I doing here? And so sometimes, like in Fragile Rock, I sang when I get nervous. I sang Neil Diamond, and she called it out. She's a huge fan. And she's hilarious. So we hit it off. But my kids were thrilled, of course, that I got to do a scene with Lava Girl. Now they're old and cool, so they can't admit it. But
that's awesome. Well, you guys can stream We Can Be Heroes right now exclusively on Netflix. And as of this recording, there is a sequel currently in the works as well that got announced a little bit earlier this year, which is exciting. It's funny. So we recorded our episode, and one of the things we talked about in our episode was we wanted a third film. Next day, the news had dropped. So maybe Brently comes back, crushing low, makes his triumphant return in the sequel. But you guys can
people demand it. I mean, it's not me. It's the masses. Thank you for having me on your show, man.
Yeah, man. So you guys can Fragile Rock is also going to be streaming on all platforms musically. We'll have links in the description below. But most importantly, if you or someone you know is struggling with suicide, addiction, self-harm, or depression, we encourage you guys to please reach out. Suicide is currently the 10th leading cause of death in the United States. And as of this recording, there are 132 suicides that occur daily on American soil. And when we go to look at the international numbers, there are 800,000 successful suicides that take place annually. We create this content not just to introduce you guys to creators, but to know that there is hope and that you have value and that you have worth. And at the end of the day, all of those links are in the description below. You guys will find a link to our suicide prevention resource library where you guys can get connected with counselors, hotlines, and more. Please stay with us. This is the reason we make this content. And speaking of social media, where can people follow you online, sir?
You can find me at Brently on Twitter and Brently Heilbron on Instagram, and wherever else you find me. Just look for the masses outside your window screaming for more crushing low, and just follow that group, and they'll lead you to my social media.
Well, we're gonna go grab a cup of coffee, and we'll see you guys next time.
Cheers.